She was still breathing when the moss started growing inside her lungs. This is not a burial. This is a punishment. A living body, intentionally transformed into soil. For over 1,000 years, we were told the accounts were just metaphor, a grim fairy tale. But in 2003, archaeologists opened a sealed chamber in Denmark, and what they found proved a biological nightmare was real. The Vikings called them the Green Women, and they were buried alive for 2 centuries, scholars argued. Did Shield-Maidens truly exist? Sure, the ancient sagas wove epic tales of Lagertha leading armies into the fray, of Grimhildur demanding her right to a trial by combat, of Hervor wielding her father's cursed sword from beyond the grave. But sagas are just stories, right? Viking fan fiction, written down by Christian monks hundreds of years after the fact. With no hard evidence, historians dismissed them as pure mythology. A fantasy. Then came 2017. That year, a DNA analysis detonated a bomb in the archaeological community. A prestigious grave in Birka, Sweden, discovered in the 1880s and catalogued for 130 years as a high-status male warrior, was retested. The result was female, genetically, undeniably female, but the grave goods made it undeniable. This wasn't just any burial. She was entombed with a warrior's full arsenal. A sword, an axe, armor-piercing arrows, a brutal battle knife, 2 shields and a set of strategic gaming pieces. This wasn't just a fighter. She was a tactical commander, a strategist. The evidence was irrefutable. Shield-Maidens were real. But this discovery raises a darker, more terrifying question. One nobody was asking: if these warrior women shattered one of the most sacred gender boundaries in Viking culture, what happened when they failed? What was the consequence for breaking the warrior's code? In a society where honor was everything, where your reputation echoed for generations, where your seat in the afterlife depended on dying with a sword in your hand, failure could not be tolerated. And I'm not talking about a clean death in battle. The Vikings respected that. No, I'm talking about something far more calculated, far more cruel. A punishment designed specifically for those who brought the ultimate, unforgivable shame. A punishment so horrifying, it was systematically erased from history. They called it the wet room, so imagine it. You are that shield maiden. You've earned your place in the shield wall through blood and sheer skill. Your reputation is iron, your oath is sacred. Then in the blinding, screaming chaos of battle, you do the unthinkable, you run. In Old Norse, there is a word for this ultimate betrayal, nidinga. It doesn't translate cleanly. It's beyond coward, beyond traitor. It means you are spiritually polluted, a stain on the social fabric itself. And for a shield maiden, a woman who had already violated norms to claim the status of a warrior, this betrayal was existential. You didn't just break an oath. You proved the skeptics right. You proved that women couldn't be trusted as warriors. The punishment had to be a message. It had to be worse than death. Because death was an honor. Death meant Valhalla, or at least a peaceful burial with your ancestors. So they built special chambers, stone-lined pits, dug deep beneath the frost line, where the earth stayed perpetually wet. The walls wept constant moisture. The air hung thick, the temperature hovering just above freezing. Here's how it worked. You are stripped of your weapons and armor, the very symbols of your stolen status. You are lowered into the pit. It is engineered perfectly, just tall enough that you can't stand upright, but too short to lie down comfortably. A stone cap seals the entrance, and this is the crucial, cruel part. They leave a single air hole just wide enough for a fist. They don't want you to suffocate. Not yet. Every few days a bucket is lowered. It contains the bare minimum to keep you alive. Stale bread, rancid fish, sometimes just water. This is where the account of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, that Arab diplomat from 922 CE, becomes terrifyingly literal. He wrote of seeing green women in pits. For a millennium, scholars dismissed it as poetic metaphor. They were wrong, because in those moisture chambers, something inevitable begins to happen. The constant 98% humidity, your own body heat, The perpetual darkness. You become the perfect incubator, but the moss wasn't an accident. It wasn't a side effect. The Vikings knew exactly what they were creating. And the biological horror that follows makes modern torture methods look merciful. This part immerses the viewer in the perspective of the condemned and establishes the deliberate, cruel engineering of the wet room, transforming Ibn Fadlan's account from myth into a blueprint for torture. Let me explain the biological nightmare, step by horrifying step. What happens to a living human body in 98% humidity over the course of weeks? Your skin begins to macerate. That's the medical term. Think of your fingers after a long bath, wrinkled, soft, vulnerable. Now imagine that happening to your entire body. Your skin's protective barrier dissolves. It becomes porous, defenseless, and that is the invitation. Sphagnum moss spores, which are everywhere in that Scandinavian soil, find you. They land on your softened skin, and they germinate. Within days, you'd see them. Green patches blooming on your arms, your legs, your back, anywhere pressed against the weeping stone. At first you can brush it off, but it always grows back, thicker each time. This is where the true violation begins. The moss isn't just sitting on you anymore. It starts to root. Microscopic roots called rhizoids penetrate your softened pores. They anchor deep into your tissue. You can't scratch them out. It's an itch under your skin, a maddening, constant presence, and you're not alone in the dark. The moss creates the perfect environment for fungal spores, which you are breathing in with every single breath. Your lungs become a second garden. A medical condition we now call invasive pulmonary aspergillosis takes hold. You start to cough. Then you cough up blood. Each breath is a ragged, desperate fight. This is when the delirium sets in. A toxic cocktail of hypothermia, oxygen deprivation, and your own immune system collapsing. You lose track of time. You speak to phantoms. Historical accounts mention the green women who conversed with the dead. This wasn't mysticism. It was a medical fact. Your mind is unraveling in the absolute blackness. By this point, if you are somehow still alive, the transformation is nearly complete. You are not just in the earth. You are becoming the earth. The moss roots have penetrated past your skin, deep into your subcutaneous fat. The rhizoids, those microscopic roots, are now millimeters into your muscle tissue. The process that creates bog bodies over centuries is happening to you in a matter of weeks. You are being actively converted into peat. The Grettir's saga contains a single chilling line that now makes perfect, horrifying sense. It speaks of women who became part of the earth before dying their deaths. This was not a metaphor. It was a medical observation. Most victims lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of conscious, agonizing integration, of feeling your body, the very vessel of your warrior's spirit, be systematically colonized and broken down. But for over 1,000 years, this was all just a ghost story. A dark whisper with no physical proof, until 2003. In Denmark, a construction crew's excavator hit something solid, a deliberately placed stone. Archaeologists were called in, expecting a storage pit. What they uncovered was a perfectly constructed stone-lined chamber, 2 meters deep, with ancient drainage channels to maintain a constant, dreadful humidity. And inside, human remains. A woman, aged 25 to 30, dated to the heart of the Viking Age, but this was no honorable burial. The weapons buried with her, a broken sword, a shattered shield boss, were not placed with respect. They were defiled, thrown in. This was a mockery of the warrior's death she was denied. The evidence was about to get so much worse. First, the bones. Preserved deep within the marrow cavities, protected from normal decay, were traces of sphagnum moss. This wasn't moss that grew on her corpse. For it to be inside the very structure of her skeleton, it had to have been growing on her and rooting into her while her heart was still beating. Then the walls. The stone was covered in scratch marks, not random gouges, but deep, systematic grooves. Forensic analysis confirmed they were made by human fingernails over a prolonged period. Different angles, different depths, a weeks-long testament of desperate, clawing terror in the absolute dark. But the final, most chilling piece of evidence came from her throat. Microscopic analysis of her tracheal bones revealed they were packed with thousands of sphagnum moss spores, embedded into the very bone matrix. She hadn't just been breathing in the spores, her lungs had been actively colonized. She was suffocating from the inside out, her airways turning into a garden. Long before her body finally gave out, by calculating the moss's growth rate and the depth of the root penetration into her bones, researchers established a timeline that is almost impossible to comprehend. She survived in that chamber for 6 to 8 weeks, 2 months. Trapped in a living nightmare, feeling her body become part of the earth, breath by ragged breath. So why don't our history books speak of this? Why was this brutal practice erased? The answer lies in a shift of power. Christianity reached Scandinavia around 1000 AD. Within a generation, punishments like the wet room were reframed as the barbarism of a pagan past. Too extreme to document, too shameful to remember. The sagas we know? They were written by Christian monks 200 years after the Viking Age ended. They kept the glory stories, the heroic battles, the honorable deaths. They systematically scrubbed away the shame. Until now, the 2017 Birka discovery proved Shield-Maidens were real. The 2003 Harby Chamber proved their punishments were just as real. These were not myths. They were women who lived, fought, and for some, suffered a fate so cruel we are only now beginning to understand its full horror. Here is the reality we are left with. How many other sites have we walked past, dismissing as simple bog or stone, that are actually sealed punishment pits? The Harby discovery was a fluke, a lucky break from a construction crew. What else is still buried, waiting to tell its story? I've linked the full, peer-reviewed archaeological reports from both the Birka and Harby excavations in the description below. The details are even more chilling than what we've covered. Now I want to hear from you. The remains of this woman are currently in storage, not on display. Should museums exhibit these victims to educate the world about this hidden history? Or is putting their suffering on display a final, profound disrespect? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to uncover more history that was meant to stay buried, click the video on screen now. You won't believe what they found hidden beneath a monastery in medieval France.